Record. That's a different sound than ever before. Okay, John Wheeler's coming in. Hi, John.
He's there. I
Okay.
think I can't remember. I think he told me he might be just listening. I can't remember. I didn't
Okay.
see.
No worries.
Uh,
I will continue to admit
oh
people.
no, he's watching.
There he is.
Hi, John.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
I may have to hop early, but I'm hoping I can catch as much of this as possible. This is awesome. Thanks for the invite.
You're welcome.
Okay, I will keep admitting people as we get started. Hopefully a few more will come. I am Christine Craddock from the Mental Health Association of Fauquier County, and I just want to thank you guys for attending this lunch and learn, from experience to empowerment. And we're going to start with Tim, who is going to introduce himself and then share his screen. So go ahead, Tim.
Yes. Okay, so hello. I'm Tim Borden. I serve as a recovery navigator for clients of the Public Defender's Office in Winchester, Virginia. And I have a presentation to share with y'all here. If I can remember how to do that now.
You got it.
We just did it. Where's my controls? Uh,
Do you have your share screen button at the top
yeah,
or
it's coming up.
bottom?
Here we
Okay.
go. I just gotta remember which one I'm going to now. I have three screens here. I'm spoiled for choice.
I have about
Okay.
55 tabs open, so I understand.
So here we go. Screen three, and there we go.
Perfect.
So, can y'all see the pretty Shenandoah Valley?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I work in the District 26 office of the Public Defenders here in Virginia. We cover quite a wide area. Not all of it is as pretty as that picture. And you can see a little bit of information here about the Recovery Navigator program in the Public Defender's Office. We have 14 peer specialists working now. Last year we had 5. So everybody's quite excited about the growth. And we support exclusively clients that are experiencing opiate use disorder. And there's a little bio about me. I spent most of the last 20 some years living overseas, working in language education. And a lot of those communication skills come in handy with what we do here. A little bit of background about Recovery Corps. So this is Katie Thompson. She's the executive director. She just took over. She was my mentor in the previous term. She's brilliant. There's a little information here about the challenge in Virginia in 2023, which is the most recent statistics that are online here. There were over 21,000 substance use disorder related emergency department visits. One of the main factors in deciding where people like me, recovery navigators, are placed within the state of Virginia in terms of which PD office to go to was based on opioid death rates. So the areas that they have placed people, mostly successfully placed people, that started always with the opioid death rate being higher than the average. And not every office in those areas has one, but that is kind of the launching point. And we have a couple of more statistics here. 1,200 people or more than 1,200 people received support from Recovery Corps in 24-25, and more than half of those reported a positive change. And you can see on the left and the right here all of the cities where we are working, including Winchester, where my office is, and Warrenton, where the MHA is. Okay, so a little bit more sort of broader information so you can see how they're spread out geographically. And we have two positions. I'm a recovery navigator, which I'll talk a little bit more about what that actually means. And then Recovery Corps also has project coordinators. And you can see where they're placed around the state here, and in some we have both. You know, in a sense, just like it sounds, project coordinators work on projects, recovery navigators work with individuals, essentially. And recovery navigators are people with lived experience with addiction and recovery. Project coordinators, that's not a requirement. So anybody that's interested in working with a recovery corps but isn't personally living with living in recovery or having had experience with addiction, that's an option for them as well. And then here's a sort of breakdown of all the different areas or all the different types of organizations that we are placed in, with government agency being the top one. And obviously where I work would fall under that category. We're in 41 sites, 30 cities, 21 counties. We have 29 partners, 26 active members, and have served over 7,400 minutes last year. Not sure why they decided to put it in minutes, but it is an impressive number. What does that service mean for me? Essentially, here in the public defender's office, this is part of an effort to break the cycle of repeat offenses and incarceration for people who are caught in this system or are in the beginning stages of being caught in this system and are often being punished for their disease, obviously along with poor choices that they've made. I share my lived experience with addiction, the criminal justice system, and recovery as a hopeful example of someone who's made a lot of poor choices, but is now making better ones. And so on an individual level, that's what I do. And on a larger level, the project is working for a healthier, safer future for our community. And we endeavor to empower our clients and our participants with, you know, promotion of their resilience and autonomy. One of the reasons we do that is, you know, because as you can see on the screen here, incarceration is not just something that affects the people who get locked up. And this is, you know, specifically about incarceration, but any involvement in the justice system affects not just the individuals, but their loved ones, their families, and the community that they're either removed from go back to. This is a pretty stunning statistic that I saw recently because it was relevant to a case that we were working on, that 50% of Americans have had an immediate family member incarcerated and 20% have had a parent incarcerated. I think it's one of the things that gets lost for a lot of people who don't intersect much with the criminal justice system, that they might think that providing resources to people who have broken the law allegedly might not be the best use of those resources. But it's important to remember that we're not just here to support them, but through supporting them, we support their families and the community. And here is where we're doing that. For where I'm doing it and where everybody else in this office is doing it. So this is the district. It's quite large, as I said before. We have the main office in Winchester. The one that I'm in right now actually is Front Royal, Virginia, which is a satellite office. It's one of the few satellite offices in the state for the VIDC. The reason we have that is because we cover so much ground. So we have Winchester City, Clark, Frederick, Warren, Shenandoah, and Page County. And we have a team of attorneys that cover that area. I think we just hired a couple new people, between 12 and 14, I think at this time. And each of those attorneys has around a caseload of about 150 at any given time, which is a lot according to Christine's face. And when I first came to meet the team, and I met Pete McDermott, who's the chief PD here, and Brad Buster, who's the deputy, they told me that about 80% of their cases involve substance use in one way or another. So quite a lot of need for this work here. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the geography, this is obviously West Virginia. This is Route 81. And if you look at the rest of the state, here's where we sit in that. These highways here, 81 and 95, are also known as cocaine corridors. The Port of Baltimore is about 2 hours, 2.5 hours from Winchester. And over the past, well, let's just sticking to the opioid epidemic, the past, say, 30 years of the pharmaceutical opioid epidemic, a lot of the opioids that have ended up everywhere else in the country come through here. And obviously end up in other parts of Virginia as well. So there's quite a lot of need in this area for this work. The way that I explain the work that I do to the clients is we together identify their strengths and support network, and then we work those towards their goals, which sometimes, but not always, depend on the resolution of their legal situation. And then meanwhile, I'm working in the office to get the best legal outcome possible with the attorneys. So we have a scope of work, like peer recovery specialists generally have a scope of work. This is the more specific scope of work for the recovery navigators in the public defender's office. You can see what we can and can't do. Starting off, one important thing that we always keep track of, because this is a grant-funded position, is screening to identify if their primary diagnosis is opioid use disorder. So I'm not a doctor. I don't claim to be able to diagnose anybody with opioid use disorder, but we use a checklist, which you'll see later, to verify and track that the people self-identify in a measurable way as having opioid use disorder. And so the criteria for us to work with them is that they fit that disorder through that checklist. It's not about what is the crime they committed. It doesn't have to be an opioid case. It could be a shoplifting case. But if they suffer from opioid use disorder, we can work with them. Some of the differences in this work, in this setting, and in others, we only work really out of the office and communicate through the office communication tools, which means the office phone number, office email, office hours, essentially. A lot of peer recovery work is done in all hours of the day and meeting people where they are. Most of the people that we meet where they are in jail, and we meet them during business hours, and they can only contact us through the channels that I mentioned before, which makes it quite different than a lot of peer recovery work that's going on outside of this setting. Another thing that people often get confused about, a peer is not a sponsor. A peer recovery specialist and a sponsor are two very different things. A sponsor is part of some 12-step recovery pathways, and peer recovery support is about identifying and supporting somebody through whatever recovery pathway they choose. We do not provide therapeutic services either. Like I say, I'm not a doctor or any kind of clinician. What we can do is listed here. And as you can see, this is a relatively short list, but each one of those things can involve quite a lot of different work depending on the individual and the jurisdiction and the case that they're facing. So, we do help people get into treatment facilities if possible, and support them with a transition between Medicaid, incarcerated Medicaid, community Medicaid, or applying to Medicaid if they haven't been on it. That sort of resource navigation is a part of what we do. Arranging transportation, a lot of our clients are dealing with co-occurring mental health disorders, and receiving mental health support is often a real priority for them. And that's something that we can help to facilitate both within and outside of the jail. Depending on the jail, it's some places easier than others, but obviously receiving mental health support is challenging, in any environment, and in a jail even more so. And then there's some more of the things that we can do from a peer support standpoint. Setting goals, which we'll talk more about later, and tracking those goals, tracking recovery capital, which I'll show a little bit more about that, identifying strengths, like I mentioned before, and giving the client autonomy and action. I mean, this is the crucial component to all of this. Everything we do is driven by what the clients want for themselves. I'm not there to tell anybody what to do. That's for the judge. So I mentioned the OUD checklist, which is this one, which comes from the DSM-5. So we ask people, once we get a referral, which comes from the attorney when they think there might be something I can do to support their client, the first thing I have to do is this. So I asked them to think about the last 12 months of their life, and we go through these questions together, and they just simply say yes or no. Anybody who has experienced 2 of these symptoms in the past 12 months would qualify. So that is the opioid use disorder checklist. And one of the things that I find important to do during this process is, once we've done that, ask them how they feel about it, and like any disease, opioid use disorder could be mild, moderate, or severe. And so I'll ask them, before we've counted up all the checks, or before they even have an idea that that is coming, how they feel about it and how they would rate their own opioid use disorder. And that is more important than what this checklist is going to rate it at, in terms of how they feel. And so that's the next question is, well, how do you feel about that? And what would you like to do about it? And that leads to what we do next. So another thing that they are sort of a challenging aspect of their situation, along with being in recovery from opioid use disorder, is being incarcerated. Usually we have 2 intake forms. This one is the criminal justice involved intake form. So this means that people are in a detention facility when I'm doing this checklist. This is just to see essentially how they were treated and how they're being treated in that facility. So when somebody is thinking about what they want to do about their disorder and their recovery, we want to take into account the environment that they're in, the context that they're in, and also demonstrate that the agency that I'm there to represent, which is in the case of this form, the VIDC, cares about how they're being treated and what kind of support they have received before I get there. So So this is just some basic information about that. Testing for communicable diseases, substance use disorder counseling, mental health care, job training, detox, etc. And they appreciate that in my experience. Like they, one of the most important parts of my role is it gives people an opportunity to be seen and be listened to. And it's one thing to be seen by an individual. It's another thing to feel like they're being seen by this state agency. And that form does go a long way to demonstrating that. Even though it's just a short yes or no thing. So now, once we've done all that, I have a whole bunch more questions that I have to ask them. So this is the demographic information for Recovery Corps. This can be kind of time consuming to get through because we do this one, which asks, just about sort of basic demographic information that you would expect: employment, education, race, marital status, etc. And it includes a few questions that aren't relevant to people who are in a detention facility, like how often they use the internet and how they get on the internet. Public assistance is very relevant because a lot of people that we're working with are receiving public assistance. They're, low income clients, and so that is very common. And that does come in handy when we're doing resource navigation. Co-occurring mental health conditions, like I mentioned before, comes up a lot, and this gives us another opportunity to get into that. Pregnancy is something that has come up several times. And primary caregiver to children under the age of 18. This is another quite common characteristic that applies to the population that we serve. We check in with the other substances that they might be in recovery from and the pathways that they have followed or are currently following. So, like I mentioned before, a sponsor is somebody who's associated with some 12-step programs. In peer support broadly, we support people through whatever recovery pathway they want to choose for themselves. There's 10 or so listed here. And when I did my peer recovery support training, there were how many listed? Does anybody remember that's out there listening to me? How many recovery support pathway or recovery pathways did we learn about when we did our training? Anybody? You can answer. I'm not hearing it. John, you know? No? Okay.
Remember, I
It was in
didn't
the
officially go through the training, so.
right, but you know this stuff. It was in the 90s. It was I think 97
I was
at the
gonna
last
say
count when we
100.
did our training. Huh?
I was gonna say
What did you say,
100.
Christine? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's in that neighborhood. So we are not going to list 100 recovery pathways on this sheet. So we have this little space for other, right? One of the things that might surprise people about this work is how many times I'm told by people in their 30s and 40s and 50s that this is really the first time they're hearing about recovery. I heard about 12-step programs when I was a teenager, but not everybody has that experience. And education, spreading the word is another big part of what we do. Okay. It is hard to follow a pathway if you've never been exposed to it, obviously. So now we talk about recovery capital. This is the next form that we fill out in our first session. capital is essentially the resources that we use for whatever we're endeavoring to do, and this is Recovery Corps' form to measure somebody's recovery capital in any given moment. So they read through these statements, or we read them through them together, and then they number them for how they agree or disagree. This can be the beginning of some more challenging moments. A lot of people that we serve do not get a lot of support from their friends, for example. A lot of them are not happy with their life. Um, you know, this concept of there being more important things to me in life than substances, sadly, for many of these people, they can't see what is more important to them than substances in this moment. So they answer these questions honestly. One thing that might surprise you is the answer to my living spaces helped drive my recovery journey. A lot of people in detention facilities give this a pretty high number. I hear regularly that people feel like being in jail is helping them stay away from the substances that they would otherwise be using. It isn't usually the pathway that they would choose, but it can drive someone's recovery journey. And then we look for ways to build on that, build on the abstinence that is sometimes forced by being incarcerated. And we, work to get these numbers up over time together. Quality of life, similarly, they would answer these questions in terms of anywhere from 1 to 5, how satisfied they are with these aspects of life. Another surprising thing about the living environment is that often people are relatively satisfied with the conditions of their living place. Depending on what jail they're in, we serve 4 jails mainly, and some of them are pretty well run, and they do their best to take care of the people inside of them. And in some cases, they are better than the conditions that they have left. Not always, but that is something that is sometimes might surprise people who don't do this work regularly. This is often a tough moment, self-esteem. These are all opportunities for support and finding strengths and building resiliency and sharing our lived experience. I personally have certainly circled a 1 on this checklist many times in my life, so I can understand how that feels, and that helps when working through this with a client. Okay. Like I said, we are working together to identify the strengths, identify the support networks. A lot of strengths can come through that paperwork. We do it to keep track of who we're working with and to keep track of how they're feeling. But we also do it to bring out the areas and the dimensions of life that they would like to work on. All of those areas can have goals within them, right? The legal side of this work is very results oriented. We're working towards the best legal outcome possible. The peer support work is very process oriented. Every interaction with a recovery navigator, we consider it a success because they're being connected with peer support within the criminal justice system, and we know that that gives them a better chance of maintaining recovery. And it is an evidence-based, way to do that. It is also something that wouldn't otherwise be happening without this program. So we are focused on the process, when it comes to the support more than the results. But the results that we are focused on all come from the individual. So if you look at this goals form, this is for all of Recovery Corps in the state of Virginia. So there are all of these goal areas here. And as you could imagine, a lot of the goals that we're working on relate to legal support and assistance. Rarely do they relate to food resources or transportation, for example. Resilience building and community integration is a big part of reentry planning, which I'll mention a little bit more of later. Education, gratefully, is something that can be accessed in a lot of these jails. Housing resources is something we work on when we're planning for reentry. Employment as well. And family resources, working to liaise between the clients and their family, because that can be challenging from within the jail, is also a big part of what we do. And then comprehensive health and recovery management would also be an area we touch on a lot. And then documentation and benefits assistance, mostly when it comes to Medicaid navigating. You can see here a lot of the more specific goals that could come from within these different areas. And again, a lot of these are not possible while they're in a detention facility, but we can work towards them and set them up for success when they get out. So,
And Tim, I just had a quick question.
yeah.
Is
Tell
it
me.
okay? You mentioned when you're showing the Recovery Corps data at the front end, there was a mention of
Mhm.
partners. And then when you're talking about what the recovery navigators can and can't do, one of the things were these outside referrals with this treatment or counseling or work. Given given people are incarcerated or have records and things like that, has VIDC or Recovery Corps set up a specific set of target go-to partners, right, that work with people like your participants to care for their very specific needs? Or is it just each navigator is generally accountable for kind of building out their local network of referral partners?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So I will answer that question in just a second. So essentially, we have all of these different areas that we can be working on, and we also have the legal outcome that we're working towards. Some of these processes happen quite quickly. Some of them take a number of months, right? So we have, an attorney takes the case of each client. Sometimes a client will have more than one attorney. They'll be located in a particular facility. I make regular contact with them, which I keep track of. I also track their goals, short and long term, which are both legal and all of the other ones that we just saw. Strength, support. The status would just be something I check in regularly with the attorney, just kind of where are we in this process and where are they? And then their court dates. So when it comes to resource navigation and working towards accomplishing any goals that involve people in the community, this is our resource guide. So this was made originally in Prince William, and then it was adapted by our incredibly brilliant mitigation specialist, Ana Lopez, who is my site supervisor. So as you can see, there are 26, 25 different categories here for resources that have been that we have relationships with that have been developed over the last couple of years by Anna. And another part of my role here is to seek out those resources that we might need, find new ones, develop relationships, etc. So we also work as a team within the state. So for example, if we're looking for somebody who is for resources for somebody who's pregnant, that's a scarce resource. If we're looking for a particular kind of vocational training, We might draw on the experiences of people in other offices, whether they're mitigation specialists on the attorney staff or recovery navigators in other cities that may or may not work in public defenders' offices. A lot of them work in community organizations that can provide links to things like education or housing, but also be landing spots for comprehensive care. Does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, it does. This is good. And the
Okay.
fact that you've got it as a data set and across recovery court makes a ton of sense. So
Right.
thanks.
And we're constantly adding to this and improving it. So that is where we keep all that information. And I've just got a couple of minutes left to show you some of the tools that I work with to do this work. There are many definitions of SAMHSA or of recovery. There's not 100 as far as I know, but in the training that I did, I think I saw, I don't know, 8 or 9. I really like the SAMHSA's working definition of recovery, which is that it's a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. So these are the 4 dimensions of recovery according to SAMHSA. Obviously, this is a home. This is, anybody know what that is?
I think it's career, isn't it? Because I think that's health and community on the bottom, right?
Health and community and purpose is this one. Which, your career often is a big part of purpose. So you were close, John. And we work a lot with the 8 dimensions of wellness. So when I'm interviewing a client, which I do using a process called motivational interviewing, which we won't have too much time to get into today, but we could cover on some other webinar. I'm just having a conversation with them, essentially. That's what it looks like. That's what it is. As I'm having that conversation, I'm taking notes. And each of those notes is going to go into one of these 8 categories. So we have these 8 dimensions of wellness: vocational, social, emotional, environmental, physical, financial, intellectual, and spiritual. Rarely does anything come up in a conversation that won't fit somewhere in that circle. And then from this, we get the goals and we get the achievements, because there'll be some positive or some negative or some things that are in the process of going from one direction to another in all of these areas. And once we've had that interview, we look at that together and see what the goals are that the person has expressed, often without me asking them, oh, well, what are your spiritual goals this week? So I do that through active listening, which you might know something about. Here is a little more about it. The most crucial thing about active listening is the first one: listening to understand, not to respond. It is something that no matter how much you know about it, you can always get better at. And just to finish up, OARS is a good acronym to remember when doing this type of interviewing. OARS is just a way to remember open questions. That means questions that can be answered in a complex way with more than just one word. Affirmation, so we're affirming people's strengths. If a client tells me about an altercation they had in a jail, I'm going to affirm the fact that they walked away rather than they started with verbal insults. There's always some positives that we can affirm, and we can affirm how they're feeling about that and the things that we're doing well. I want to reflect their emotions and reflect what they're saying to make sure that that I'm receiving what they are transmitting to me accurately, and summarize occasionally just to make sure we're on the right track. People, when they're stressed out, they go on a lot of tangents. So summarizing makes it easier to be sure that we're talking about the right things. And then finally, eliciting is a way of getting what the client knows and believes truly within themselves out, which can be challenging in any environment and more so in jail. So here are some steps for eliciting. One of the most important being to be comfortable with silence. People in jail generally have a lot of time on their hands and they have a lot of things that are difficult to say, and that takes time and patience. And one of the great gifts that we have for them is that time. And we reflect on this with this new weekly motivational interviewing self-reflection form that we've got this year. And I'll skip through that because I'm out of time. And just close by saying, there's usually several compounding issues in play with each of these clients: marginalization, oppression, poverty, mental health struggles, like I mentioned before, inequitable healthcare access, trauma, etc. I mean, we work through all of this to break the cycle for these individuals of recidivism, reoffending, and support them in putting themselves on a path to recovery. So that is what it's about, and thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was a great presentation, and your empathy is evident as you speak about what you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
We can take questions at the end, but I wanna.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna stop my share.
Okay.
Yeah, that was there just in case I ran out of things to say, which clearly didn't happen.
So I'm going to send it over to Stacy Myers. We had a great conversation before we started here, and she is going to introduce herself and then share her screen and talk about Celebrate Recovery.
Hi guys, my name is Stacy. I'll introduce myself the way that we would in Celebrate Recovery. Celebrate Recovery is a faith-based 12-step program. And so I would say, hello, I'm a believer, I'm a follower, I'm even a disciple of Jesus Christ. I celebrate victory over narcotics. I have 21 years sobriety over cocaine, amphetamines, other things. I have, let's see, like 12 years sobriety over a 37-year nicotine habit. I struggle with bipolar. I have victory over the effects of sexual abuse, codependency, and my name is Stacy. So everybody would say, "Hi, Stacy," and we introduce ourselves that way because we're a little bit different than some of the other 12-step programs. I'm not a drug addict. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not a victim. I'm a believer in Christ, and I do struggle with some of these things, but I have victory over them, and I don't identify with the substance or the, struggle. That doesn't define me. He defines me. So we're very different in that respect. So let me pull up my screen here and launch, because I will talk too much and waste my time.
Not wasting anybody's time, girl.
So I will say that I have been part of Celebrate Recovery since 2007. My husband and I both run this ministry. We are volunteers at Liberty Community Church in Bealton, and this is what we do. So you'll hear more as we go through. Let me get the slides going here. Okay. You guys seeing everything?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
It's not in
so,
slideshow format though. I think just click
yeah.
on slideshow.
Do that. Oops. Sorry, I am a new person at doing slideshows on Zoom. I know how to show up, but I don't know how to do slides. All right, here we go. So defining moment. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program. Where and when did Celebrate Recovery begin? It was founded in 1991, so it's been around a super long time. It's not a fly-by-night program. It was founded by Pastor John Baker with his wife Cheryl, and God had given him a vision of a ministry, a Christ-centered ministry, where people could find freedom from their hurts, hangups, and habits. John Baker was part of AA, but he found that he couldn't share his relationship about Jesus in those environments. So God gave him this vision. He started the program, and it was launched with 43 people that attended that first night. And they started with 4 groups: men and women's chemical dependency, and men and women's codependency. And we still do that today. When new groups start, that's how we start. So where can you find Celebrate Recovery? Initially, it was just in churches, often in church basements, just like AA, just like NA, different programs, different 12-step programs that meet in churches. We meet in the basements. But eventually it kind of broke out of that place and started going into the prisons and the jails, recovery houses, rescue missions, and universities. For my husband and I, for the ministry that we lead in Bealton, Virginia, we broke out of our church basement in 2023 when we were invited to come to the C Recovery Center in Culpeper, which was a huge step. And 2024, we wound up in the jail in Culpeper, at least for the females. And then within 6 months of that, we went to I went to the Central Virginia Regional Jail down in Orange, and I've been there since then. So there's many other, I keep saying my husband and I, we're the ministry leaders for the one in Bealton, but there's CR groups all over the place. There's 2 in Warrenton that I can think of. There's one in Haymarket. There's one in Locust Grove. They're in Louisa. They're in Fredericksburg. You can go to the website and just put in your zip code and find something, wherever there is a registered Celebrate Recovery. So the core principles of Celebrate Recovery, it centers on God's grace and forgiveness as a foundation for recovery and transformation, along with a personal relationship with Jesus. All of the 12-step programs will say, the God of your understanding. One of the things that we're different with is we flat out say it's a personal relationship with Jesus. And we found that too often when we speak about God, it's an obscure God. But we, again, it's Jesus, not just this God that I can't see, that I can't hear, and that I don't have access to. Biblical teachings are integrated with recovery steps, and that guides lasting personal change and spiritual growth. The program promotes healing of mind, body, and spirit for a total comprehensive recovery, and it's forward focused. So rather than, and I've been in a lot of 12-step meetings myself, obviously, other than CR, rather than go in and dwell on past mistakes and choices, we learn and we move forward, and we use our past as a springboard, not as a place to revisit over and over again. Some of the language in Celebrate Recovery is we use the words hurts, hangups, and habits. Hurts are emotional wounds that can affect our relationships and daily functioning, often making life more challenging. Sexual abuse, would be a huge hurt that I faced in my path. The effects of it, and how that affected my marriage, my relationships with men, my relationships with women, and my relationship with myself. Hang-ups, I have a lot of hang-ups too. Hang-ups describe persistent negative thought patterns or attitudes that block personal growth and happiness. Hang-ups are like codependencies, a hang-up, black and white thinking, all or nothing kind of thinking, just recurring negative self-esteem, just the way the negative self-talk that we do with ourselves. All of those things are, considered hang-ups. Habits is self-explanatory. You can have a positive or a negative habit, which are repeated behaviors, and it shapes our actions and our overall well-being. So what Celebrate Recovery did is it's the same 12 steps. And I'm going to oversimplify the 12 steps for folks that this is a recovery, lunch and learn. So I'm sure everybody knows, but I simplify it sometimes just to give an overview. The steps basically are teaching us to get right with God, to admit that we need to be more dependent on Him and aware of Him than we are. Getting right with ourselves, that's the inventory process that's going through and recognizing how that we have hurt people, and how other people have hurt us, and ultimately getting to a place where we can see our part in it. And then after that, getting right with ourselves, we have to get right with others, our relationships. And then the last few steps is about living in that place and learning how to get back to the community. So what we've done is, or what they've done is they took the 12 steps and they adapted it. It's the same 12 steps, the same language, but we added biblical comparisons. For example, so step 1 says, we admitted we were powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors, that our lives had become unmanageable. Romans 7:18, I know that nothing good lives in me, that is in my sinful nature, for I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. And then something unique to Celebrate Recovery, we added 8 recovery principles. So it incorporates the Beatitudes, which is Jesus's Sermon on the Mount. Find that in the Bible in Matthew chapter 5, to support spiritual growth and healing. Celebrate Recovery is famous for its acronyms, and they use the word recovery. And with each letter of the word, it represents one of the 8 principles. So principle 1 would go along with step 1. Principle 1 says, I realize I'm not God. I admit that I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing, and that my life is unmanageable. And that goes with Matthew 5:3, blessed are those who know they are spiritually poor. So we read these steps and principles at every meeting. So our weekly meetings would include worship, teaching, testimony, and small group discussions. Worship, think of it like a church service kind of. Worship is an integral part of these meetings. It fosters spiritual connection and unity. It's a time where we put our struggles aside, no matter what problems we have, no matter what we come in the door with, and we focus on the God who created us, who alone has the power to help us recover. And then there's a teaching component, my favorite part, because I'm a teacher. And we teach on recovery principles like denial and powerlessness, relapse, inventory. It provides valuable lessons and guidance, and enhances knowledge and personal growth for attendees. And then testimonies. This is where we share our stories. We encourage that openness. It builds trust in the group. As we hear our struggles being shared in another person's victories, we begin to believe that if God cares someone, for that person and helps them, then perhaps He will care for me as well. Small group discussions foster deeper engagement and a mutual support among participants. It's peer-to-peer relationships. Again, another opportunity to hear that we're not alone. And by far, that is what we hear. It's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that what I'm struggling with is so common, and that other people struggle with the same thing. We do have accountability partners and sponsors. So these small groups create these safe environments where individuals can express vulnerability and share their experiences without judgment as they work through the steps. It's in the small groups that we share these struggles. And like a football team is comprised of many players with one common goal, to win the game, our goal is to recover what has been lost. Recovery participants find accountability partners in these groups, and they form healthy recovery relationships. They share insights, victories, and accountability for working the steps, attending meetings. Sponsors are available, provide personalized guidance and mentorship. helping individuals navigate challenges throughout their recovery journey. And often sponsors are sponsors because they have victory in a certain area. So in Celebrate Recovery, we integrate faith, scripture, and prayer. Faith provides hope. Jesus is our living hope. That during this recovery journey, we can establish a conscious contact with God in a safe place. A lot of people have been hurt by churches, by well-meaning Christians, by false beliefs, by no beliefs. And, you know, one of the things I found, especially in working at the C Center, is we're not church, we're recovering. And so we like to provide an environment where people can ask questions and explore, explore their faith. Scripture, excuse me, studying scripture helps us find guidance and encouragement. Again, personal relationship with Jesus. So we're looking to the Bible for instruction and guidance and just building upon this existing relationship or a new relationship with Jesus through the lens of recovery. And prayer. Prayer is our connection to our higher power, Jesus Christ. It's used to overcome challenges and build resilience in the recovery process as we seek wisdom, guidance, and courage to face the reality of our present, the pain of our past, and look toward our future with a renewed sense of hope and encouragement. Another aspect of Celebrate Recovery that's different is where AA focuses on alcohol, NA focuses on narcotics. We, through our relationship with Jesus, are able to focus on whatever needs recovery, whatever needs emotional healing or restoration. Often what we find is not the behavior that needs changing, it's the wounds. So the program guides individuals to confront and heal from past emotional pain effectively. We're not covering it up. We're not just talking about it and dwelling in it, but we work through it, again, through relying on a power greater than ourselves, who is all about restoration. So that, again, may be through the inventory process where we look at, who are we harboring resentments against, or people that we may fear, including God. And we come into these programs and we have all kinds of resentments and things that we have to work through. We look at the effect and the damage these circumstances have had on our lives, and ultimately it leads us to what part are we responsible for, if any. We learn principles of forgiveness, forgiving those who have hurt us. You never forget people that have hurt you. We don't teach that. We don't sanction that, but we must forgive so that we can move on. Forgiving ourselves for the choices and mistakes we've made in our life, seeking God's forgiveness for how we've hurt others. Through these processes and practices, we find freedom from the emotional and spiritual burdens that we no longer need to carry. And restoring relationships. By working the steps of recovery and cleaning up our side of the street, relationships are often restored, not always. I've seen it not be restored. But our relationship with God, our relationship with ourselves, and our relationship with others often improve and are restored. We're no longer running or hiding or carrying bitterness and resentment. We learn how to have healthy relationships with boundaries that keep us safe. It's been said that hurt people, but changed people change people. So participants share their stories of successfully overcoming their struggles through support and perseverance. It doesn't happen overnight. I've been in this program for 21 years. I'm still struggling with some different issues. But the stories of victory is encouraging. When I go into the jails and I can talk to them and say, I should be where you are. I'm only not, by the grace of God, and I didn't get caught. It matters and it connects with people. Stories reflect the healing process from trauma. I can't begin to tell you how many, I don't know what the statistic would be, but the women that I encounter that have trauma and sexual abuse in their past. So my story reflects the healing process, that there is an after. And it happens through these peer-to-peer relationships in a safe and supportive community. So the life-changing impact is that Celebrate Recovery profoundly does transform life by offering hope and tools for personal growth through our relationship with Christ. It's not my power. It's not their power, even they may not know it yet. It's through God's power. We also have support for families. Each Celebrate Recovery ministry is tied to its local church, and each ministry can have multiple. Celebrate Recovery is a beast. It has so many components. I'm only mentioning two that are relevant to this presentation. They have Celebration Place, which is a ministry to help children ages 5 to 13. It's the same Christ-centered curriculum that the adults are learning, and is taught on a level that the children can learn. And the Landing is another ministry of Celebrate Recovery. Is designed for junior and high school students. Again, they're mirroring the lessons. But not every Celebrate Recovery has that. It takes a lot of volunteers to do that. Volunteer, everything's volunteer. Volunteers play a vital role in supporting program initiatives, and sorry for my clock. Play a vital role in supporting program initiatives and fostering community engagement through active service. Leadership roles empower participants to guide others in peer-to-peer relationships and drive program growth, while developing essential skills and deepening commitment to community values. Step 12 is all about giving back. Having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to others and practice these principles in all our affairs. So I just put this up here because one of my, I don't know, probably something unique to me is I get a little, dig in my side sometimes, because when I say recovery, most people say, oh, drugs, sex, alcohol, and it couldn't be further from the truth. If you look at this list, I mean, this is even just a partial list: guilt, shame, lying, overeating, overworking, people pleasing. I don't think that's on there, but the need to control, grief, divorce, anxiety, anger, fear. We all have issues in our life that we need recovery from. And that's where, so where do we go? Where do we go for that? You can go to counseling, you can go to therapy. There's lots of other paths, but this is our path. This is our lens, and we just share it with our communities. This is our contact information. I can provide after the meeting, I'll provide the presentation slides and the contact information for anybody that wants it. But for now, that is what I've got. I'll just answer any questions that anybody has. I can stop sharing. There we go.
Gosh,
I have a
thank you so much.
question.
Yes, sir.
I've been to Celebrate Recovery a couple times in Warrenton,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just wondering. So you mentioned Culpeper.
Mm-hmm.
How many are there, like, in this area that meet regularly?
I don't have an answer. I know I know our little circle here, and that's why I say go to celebraterecovery.com and type in your zip code, and you can find wherever they are. I know 2 in Warrenton. Locust Grove is a full-blown, I'm going to explain that in a second, a full-blown Celebrate Recovery. We meet at the C Center. We're weird. We're strange because we started Celebrate Recovery at the C Center with enough volunteers to run the entire program. And we probably had 40 to 60 people that came through and kept on going. In other words, this was a different environment. So now this is street ministry as far as I'm concerned. These are, homeless folks. These are, folks that are dealing with mental health issues. These are people that didn't want anything to do with God. So for them to come into a meeting and to be launched into worship is beyond what they could handle. So it didn't take us too long to kind of figure out this is not working. So we had to pivot. So Celebrate Recovery has a curriculum called Life's Healing Choices. It's an 8-week program. That's what we do at the C Center in Culpeper. And we don't quite fit under the mold, so you won't find us. You won't find us on the website, but we've been there since 2023. And we're in Boxwood, and we're in the jails. But again, we're doing things that are a little bit outside of the Celebrate Recovery meeting that I'm sure you attended. So, sorry, to finish your question, 2 in Warrenton, 1 in Locust Grove. I think there's 2 in Fredericksburg. There's 1 in Louisa. There's 1 in Orange. And that's as much as I know.
I put a link in the chat, and it goes to our resource guides. And if you do click on the substance use disorder resource guide, we do have a listing of all of the inpatient and outpatient facilities. And the last page is support groups. And the first one we have on there is Celebrate Recovery, followed by the CARS Restore group, Christ-Centered Addiction Restoration Services, which Shelley's on this call. They have locations in Culpeper, Rappahannock, Madison, and Fauquier too. But the link right there for Celebrate Recovery is on our support group page, along with some other resources. So, oh, there's Shelley. She said hi.
Yeah. And we don't compete. I mean, there's no competition.
Right.
Like Restore and Shelley. Hi, Shelley. I love her. And we have, they have folks and they send to us, and if it doesn't matter. What matters is recovery. Where do you need to be? I'm in this lane, they're in this lane. We're all running our race, and we're just trying to help folks.
Yeah. No, I agree. Justine put in the comments about the Candlelight Vigil on the 15th, this next week at Eva Walker Park. So be sure to download that before we end this session, because I know we're over time, but that was fantastic. I just want to thank Stacy and Tim for sharing and for being so vulnerable and sharing your own story as well as what you do for other people. And so I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're restored. And I'm glad you're able to join us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if you send the contact information, Stacy, and also you, Tim, I can send it to the group if you'd like.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Appreciate
guys.
it.
Have a good
great
day.
afternoon.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.